Right guys, I think it's time I did a video on what all the numbers and settings mean in your streaming software. And I'll even throw in a little tip at the end of the video which will ease the workload on your PC so you and your viewers get a better viewing experience. Hello there gang, Tyrone here, aka TyrizzleD over on twitch.tv, and I hope you are having the best of days. On today's video, I will go over the main settings inside of your streaming software that will affect your stream quality. I'll explain what each setting does and how it affects the performance of your PC or your graphics card. I know when I first started out streaming, I would follow loads of tutorials on YouTube to dial in my settings. While this will get you started off, it's not exactly optimal to your configuration. So this video will give you a little bit of an idea about what each setting does so you can actually customize it for your streaming audience. Hopefully by the end of this video you will have a better understanding of how to optimize your setup for your hardware. As per usual guys, I'll leave useful links and timestamps in the description below. And before we get started, I'm going to ask you all one simple question. What streaming software do you use for your streams? Rightio guys, after all that, let's get on with the video. Rightio guys, here is a basic overview of the software that I use, which is OBS. I just realized because I'm recording it's looking very strange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the preview window. There we go. Much cleaner. I'm just going to have to go in blind because I can't see myself and what I'm doing wrong, but whatever. It's all part of the fun anyway. See how we get on with this. But we're here for the settings, obviously. So we'll go over here, click on settings, and we're going to have a quick look over all these tabs. Now, for the sake of streaming, I'm only going to concentrate on probably 4 of these tabs, because most of them are actually irrelevant for the stream itself. So when it comes to the general guys, I would leave everything as it is. General is exactly what it is. It just gives you an overview of what's going on with the actual program. So have a quick look over your general. So the first one we're actually going to look over properly is stream. This is the first thing you need to come over to stream to your desired platform. So you can see on your service here, you can go with Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Restream, Twitter. You can pretty much stream to anything that has a live video output these days, which is dead good. So what you do there, obviously, is you pick the place you want to stream. Give yourself a medal, you've done the hardest part. Nah, I'm only messing, but that's what you do there. For your server, guys, leave that as automatic. Your streaming software is very good at finding the nearest server to you, and this isn't like you're playing a game of Call of Duty where you need the crispiest servers ever. This is just somewhere to send your data so it can be uploaded to the interwebs. So at least just leave this on automatic and it will pick the closest server to you, the most optimal server. Don't worry about it. Pick it, don't worry about it. Next thing that comes along here, enable bandwidth test mode. Now this is good for a very quick diagnosis. What it basically does is it streams your stream to a server that has no access or has no output. So all of your things like your bitrate, to see if your game can handle, your PC can handle the game and streaming at the same time. If you hit this button and then watch your stats as you're gaming, streaming, etc., this will let you know roughly what's going on with your stream. As long as none of these numbers down here spike up, you should be good. And so we're going to go straight back down now to the output setting. Now this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. I just realized I can't mess with any of this because I'm recording. That would make sense. Anyway, doesn't really matter. So the next most important thing here to set up correctly is in your output section, as it dictates the general quality of your stream in general. So we're going to start from the top and we're going to work our way down. I'm going to ignore audio track, Twitch VOD track. Anyway, so the most important thing we're going to look at here is the encoder. Now, basically you got to pick your preferred encoder here, and there's usually 2 types. You've got yourself X264 encoding, which is done on the CPU, and then you've got H264 encoding, which is done on the GPU. Difference between them is that the CPU encoding is available to everyone, but it's also the hardest to run at good settings unless you have an absolute godlike beastie of a PC, and I'm talking like 12-core, 24-threaded CPU PCs here. This is the setting that most top 0.01% of streamers use. So you're talking Pokimane, you're talking Shroud, Lulu, Dizzy when he streamed, Ace. You get the idea. The top end streamers with like the very crispy visuals, the very fluid gameplay, they will stream often X264 encoder, which is the CPU. but they've got a dedicated rig to do that. We're on the cheaper end. We're just starting out. We just want to get started. You can still use CPU encoding, X264, just a lot harder to do with a basic computer. And the other option, as I said, was H264, which is your GPU encoder. And the GPU should be available to anyone with a graphics card. And this is the preferred method of streaming from a single PC, because the GPU is a far more efficient piece of hardware for encoding your stream than the CPU is. It just can't reach the same quality as what a CPU can, because it just doesn't have the brute force to do it. But for our output, for 720p output, for 60 FPS, your GPU encoder should be more than enough. So in this particular setting here, you pick whichever one you want, so H264 or X264, and then it will dictate the next settings. Rescale output, that's very simple. Your base canvas resolution is 99.9% of the time your desktop resolution. So for most people, it's 1920 by 1080. For me, it is actually 2560 by 1440 because I have a 1440p monitor. And all this rescale output does is takes that massive image, the 2560 by 1440 in my case, and it shrinks it down to 720p. Simple as that, nothing to worry about. Next one you come down to, you've got rate control here. Now, rate control, the best thing you can do with this one, guys, is leave it on whatever the streaming service that you use has set it to. Certain streaming services like Twitch require CBR, which stands for constant bitrate, whereas the likes of YouTube and Facebook, I think you can get away with VBR, which is variable bitrate. But for the sake of argument, because you want to get your stream up and running, just leave it on whatever your streaming service sets it to in the first place. So leave it on CBR, and for me, I have to leave it on CBR for Twitch anyway. The next one down is the bitrate, and the bitrate is pretty much going to dictate the quality of the output of your stream, and it essentially tells the encoder how much data it's allowed to take from this particular scene. So with this setting, there are lots of optimal guides out there which are very quick and easy to look up. For 720p 30 frames per second, it's suggested you have a certain bit rate, which is about 3000 to 4000 kilobits per second. If you're doing 1080p 60 FPS streaming, for example, the suggested is about 8000 kilobits per second. You get the idea. Set this to whatever your internet can supply on the upload. I've got quite quick internet. I can output at 20 megabits per second, which works out at about 20,000 kilobits per second. But I only run at about 3,500 kilobits per second actually. But that's personal preference, and I'll do a video on that later on in the year as to why I only run at 3,500 kilobits per second. But we'll do a little video on that later on. Right, next one you'll have a look here. Next one preset is the preset tier, which come down to max quality all the way down to low latency performance on the GPU side. And then when it comes to the CPU side, you think you get like ultra fast all the way down to placebo or something like that. And this basically dictates the look, well, the quality of the output of your stream. With the higher the quality, the better the output. But on the flip side, the higher the preset quality, the harder the encoder has to work, so it's a bit of a trade-off. On the GPU side, you can get away with like quality or max quality because the GPU is a very efficient piece of hardware for encoding. Your CPU is not, and your CPU also has to run things like your game, your background tasks, your Windows operating system. You get the picture. So your CPU may not be able to run as high a quality as the GPU. Of course, it is dependent on what CPU you have, but generally your CPU doesn't run as high. And anything past the medium setting for 99% of streams isn't required. So slow or lower, so I don't know if you get super slow or placebo or whatever it is, there's a negligible difference that's 1080p or lower. So just bear that one in mind when you're running your outputs, your presets, sorry. Your profile on this one, specifically to me, I have to leave this on high so it opens up a few more options for me later on in terms of customization. With your profile, you can leave this on whatever setting it, again, that your streaming service leaves it on, puts it on. Whatever it's on, just leave it on there, nice and easy. Look ahead. Right, I actually put a note down on this because it's a hard one to explain. Right, so the profile, This optimizes the available bitrate and allocates it to certain frames to improve quality. Blurb, I know. But basically what it means is you get certain keyframes in your stream as you output. And when the game is not running a massive amount of like movement, say for example you're on a menu screen and it's just sitting there and you're only going up and down with a toggle, you're not using a lot of bitrate there. So what the look ahead will do is allocate some of that bitrate to improving the visual quality of your stream at that particular point. Then as soon as you get more fluidity in there, you come out of the menu, you start moving around, that's when it will take some of that bitrate back to worry about rendering the movement of your scene. Yeah, so psychovisual tuning, this works similar to look ahead with optimizing bitrate for fast content. So I check this. So it's kind of like the opposite of your look ahead. This one takes your fast-paced frames or the fast pacing of your game and makes it a little bit crispier for your viewers. Next one down, GPU. Now this one only applies to H.264 encoding because it's run on a GPU. Leave this on whatever setting it is. More specifically, leave it on 0. If you have 2 GPUs in your system, that doesn't necessarily mean the big massive graphics card. You don't have to have 2 of them. It could be the massive graphics card and the built-in graphics card on your CPU. You don't want OBS switching from your main graphics card to the embedded graphics on your CPU for rendering, because it slows the entire PC down. And then max B frames, you have to leave this at 2. According to Twitch on Nvidia graphics cards for whatever reason, so we just leave that at 2 as it is. And there you go, that's your output done, guys. Again, I don't go over CPU too much because I don't use X264 encoding because my CPU is not that strong for playing games and encoding at the same time. But my GPU's encoder is very, very, very strong. It's one of the best on the market actually. So I'm more than happy to just leave everything to my Nvidia NVENC encoder and just let that worry about everything. And if you've got the same graphics cards, Nvidia graphics cards, I suggest you do the same as well. Unless you've got yourself a 12-core, 24-threaded CPU. And if you do, I don't know why you're watching this video. Right, anyway, moving on to the audio. This one's dead simple compared to the previous section. We're simply going to pick 2 specific things here. So go down and check on your global audio devices. You see your desktop audio there? You want to switch that to whatever sound output you use. So if you use a headset, you want to change that to your headset. If you use speakers, you want to change it to your speakers. If you use Bluetooth headphones, you get the idea. Put it to the device which you output sound to. If you don't tick that, when you come and load up your stream one day, you may put it on. It happens to me still. And you won't get any game audio. You'll get mic audio, but you won't get game audio. And then your stream will be wondering why, why is everything so quiet? And then you just hear your sexy burly voice constantly on the stream. You get the point. So just make sure that's ticked to whatever your sound output is, and check it at the beginning of every stream, or before every stream, even better. Oop, got to move that for me. Next one, we're going to go to the micro auxiliary audio. Now this one is simple. Just pick the device which you are going to be speaking into, whether that's your headset mic, a dedicated microphone, a little clip-on mic, whatever it is. Always set that to the microphone you are going to use to record your voice. Simple as that. Move on very quickly. Right guys, shameless plug time. If you are enjoying this video or you enjoy any of my content in general, please consider giving me a subscription down below, bottom right hand corner. Also, I do stream over on Twitch live every Tuesday, Thursday and Sunday at 7 PM GMT. If you want to go over there and ask me any questions live. Okay, back to the rest of the video. Right, yo guys, going on to pretty much the last bit we need to worry about, apart from my bonus tip later, of course, and that's the out video. Now, got 4 sections here. You've got your base or canvas resolution, your output, scaled resolution, downscale filter, and common FPS values. Now, base res is simple. Base resolution is whatever your desktop resolution is, or your game resolution. And this is usually the same resolution as your monitor. So in my case, it is 2560 by 1440. For you, it might be 1920 by 1080, or it might be 1280 by 720. It doesn't really matter. This is the setting which is your screen's resolution. Now the output or scaled resolution is whatever you want to downscale your video to, Or it might even upscale. You might be streaming at 720p and you want to upscale it to 1080. I highly suggest you don't, but you can do that. And what this does is it lets OBS do the downscaling for you. Whereas when we did it on output, where we outscale to the rescale here, we let the GPU or the CPU encoder downscale the image. In a preferred environment, you want your GPU to do the downscaling because it is far more efficient at doing so. However, when you become a bit more popular, say you reach affiliate and you're streaming to 30 plus viewers on the average, and you want to start doing things like video compilations to send to YouTube or another platform, this output section here is important so that you can stream at one resolution, say 720p, and then you can record at 1440p, so long as your encoder can do that, of course. This gives you the option here so that you don't just downscale everything to 720p and you wash out all the details and things like that. So that's why this output is here. So you've got two ways to output. You've got the output at the stream, at the encoder, and you've got output at the video. Just a word of warning here, guys. If you are scaling on the GPU or the CPU encoder here, do not downscale here as well. You'll compress 720 down, you'll compress from your base resolution down to a lower resolution, and then OBS will downscale it again, which will literally kill any quality in your stream and pretty much negates all of the settings that you've put in here. So don't downscale twice. Downscale on the GPU or CPU, or let OBS do the downscaling. Don't pick both, just pick one. Downscale filter. Now, again, I don't think this applies to me specifically because I downscale on the GPU. But if you do let OBS do it, try and stick to this Lanczos, whatever that's called. You want the 36 sample one, basically, because more samples means more quality is retained when you downscale that image. So that's 1080p going down to 720, looks a little bit crisper with more samples. Nice, simple and easy. And then common FPS values, because I'm recording, I've got it set to 60. When I game, I have it set to 30. Right here, guys, I alluded previously to a bonus tip that I'm going to show you all for a way that you can optimize your streaming software just that tiny little bit to eke out that little bit of extra performance. And it's very simple. See, we've got your sources section. I'm going to drag this up here, actually. I don't know if I can make it a bit larger for you. I can, but it doesn't do much. So you've got your sources here where I've got my cam source, which when I enable preview, it gets all freaky, obviously. But you've got my cam down the bottom. Hello, hello. And then you've got your display capture. Now, this is okay for me because I'm only capturing my own screen here, so it's not much of a deal or an issue. But when you're streaming, you need to import all of your scenes. So that's things like your overlays, your chat, your alerts, and all those kinds of things. Now, when you do that, they all appear in the not scenes. Sorry, where is it? I've just pulled them out. It appears in your sources here. I was wondering why I just moved it. What are you doing? Yeah, so it appears in your sources. You'll have a cam source, a display source for your game. You'll have like alerts, overlays, blah, blah, blah. And this gets very crowded in this section here. No, I'm disabling that. But what you can do, which is something that I highly suggest, so I'm going to switch over to the game one that I use for my game recording. Right, where I've got a very basic video kind of set up, my overlay at the top, take note, and my overlay at the bottom, take note, and when alerts do come up, they also pop up in the middle of the screen. Now, I run all of this through a browser. So Stream Elements, luckily, you can make all of your overlays in Stream Elements. It will save it as a hyperlink, which you can just import straight into OBS. Now, what this does for you as a streamer is it takes all of the workload of rendering videos, alerts, banners. It takes all of that away and puts it into a very small, very efficient file. So you notice at the moment I'm running at 4% CPU at 60 FPS. Now, I usually stream at 30 FPS, so that would drop that down to about 2% CPU usage. And that's for a very simple, basic kind of overlay at the top, overlay at the bottom, my camera that I'm using now, obviously. My game would be in the background, but the game would be rendered by my GPU. So the CPU would not max for more than like 5%, which is a 6-core 12-thread, which is pretty good. If you was to import every individual element, so you're talking the frame, the writing up here, the writing down here, any alerts, this will probably peak at about 10 to 11%. Again, doesn't sound like much, but when you're maxing out your games, when you're playing Apex and you want to reach 144 FPS, That's where this starts making a difference. So the biggest performance boost you can actually give yourself to try and keep as much of these elements in the browser or in your source as possible. Right guys, I hope this video content was helpful to you in some way. If it was, don't forget to give me a like or a dislike down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And also, I do stream over on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday and Sunday at 7 PM if you'd like to ask me any questions live or just generally have a chat and watch me fail at many different RPGs that I decide to play. You can also give me a overview on how you feel my setup looks, my streaming setup. And I like critical and constructive feedback, so if there's anything you think I can improve, I'd love to hear your comments down below and also over in Twitch if you would like to go and have a gander over there. Thank you very much for all of your time, guys, and we'll see you all in the next video.